Here's a place where all of us can be safe. Our stories of transformation can be safe, and all the things we want to research are safe here. This is Safe Space with Cheyenne. I'm really excited you're here, and I hope you stick around for a while, because I've got a lot to show you before I leave Earth. I love you guys. Welcome back in, all my Safe Space friends. Today I have Rose Heartsong today. She is a sex, love, and dating coach. And I am very excited for her to talk to us about her journey coming into being that type of coach, what inspired her to be this. And really, I mean, if you're a woman out there, I think this episode's for you. You really need to tap into that like divine goddess power. And we have someone here today that teaches that on a daily basis. So welcome to the show, Jenny. Thanks for coming in.
Aw, thanks so much, Kyan. Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited. So,
I know, where do we begin, right? Like,
where do we begin?
So, how'd you get into this line of work in the first place?
Well, I think with a lot of coaching, if you actually ask most coaches out there who are out in service in this sort of arena, it usually comes from a place of pain or their own suffering or their own frustration. And I actually don't have a lot of shame in my background around sex, which is pretty normal story when it comes to working with my clients. A lot of times we have shame from our religion or from our parents, or we just hush, don't talk about it. And it's just not something that we accept. And, but for me, it actually came from an unknown issue with my vulva. So this is one thing I want to bring awareness to, is that a lot of times we call it a vagina, right? That's the common word for women's genitals. But the vagina is actually the internal part. That's and the outside part that you actually can physically see is that whole area is encompassed, is called a vulva, which I think it sounds a lot prettier than vagina anyways.
I would agree.
So, vagina has always like kind of been such a weird word for me. So I'm grateful that the awareness of vulva is coming out. So when I was 12 years old, I actually started having some weird like little paper cuts down there, and I had to go to doctors and I think so like starting at 12 years old, I had doctors looking at me down there. And I went from 12 to 19 not getting any answers whatsoever. And I probably went to a variety of like 20 or 30 different doctors and different specialists and skin biopsies. And I had a huge problem with getting yeast infections and skin rashes. And it wasn't any kind of STI, but that brought a lot of awareness to the concept of STIs and about conscious sexuality. And like being intentional with who I share my body with, because it made me very vulnerable to getting an STI. And it also made me very vulnerable to getting a yeast infection, which is also very uncomfortable for women. I think the stats are like 50% or 30% of women in their lifetime will get a yeast infection, which is just an imbalance of bacteria. And well, it's an imbalance of your pH and bacteria inside the vaginal canal, which is a dark, warm, moist place. And I think it's really important that we don't shame it. It's a very common thing. The only other thing that's like more common is a bacteria vaginosis, which is kind of when you itch down there, you smell kind of fishy, things like that. These are very, very common things that women have in their lifetime. They're very easy to cure with like a round of antibiotics. But in my case, we couldn't find the solution per se. So it brought a lot of awareness to talking to my partners before I had sex and very clearly communicating my boundaries up front, which I was learning as this went on that a lot of women don't do this and men aren't used to that. It wasn't something that they were used to. And some men really loved it. Some men got triggered by it. And it kind of like brought some like curiosity to me. And it didn't keep me from having sex per se. because I did, have rounds of therapy through doctors and things like that. And there'd be times where it wouldn't be a problem and times when it would. And when it would, I just wouldn't have sex. But so it just brought like acute laser focused awareness to my genitals, which are what we, involve with sex. And then I was raised by very hippie parents that didn't get married. They actually broke up when I was 2. So I was raised in a very like alternative culture. And though I think the alternative culture is fascinating and amazing and unique, there is not a lot of healthy relationship structures because there's no marriage, there's no commitment. And so I was raised around a lot of single moms. I had a single mom. I saw a lot of very toxic relationships. And I kind of quickly learned that I was not having healthy, per se, relationships within my own life. So in 2012, I kind of got catapulted down this journey of personal growth and personal development, partially because of my health problems and, getting fed up with all of the doctors not having any answers for me. And then also partially because my mom actually died of breast cancer in 2012. So that catapulted me on a journey of really deep transformational personal growth and personal development, and kind of wanting to understand like why I have the emotions that I have, and why I just always been fascinated by why people do what they do. And I stumbled upon Tony Robbins, which he's a huge transformational speaker, and one of his main things is why do people do what they do. So I started studying that, and that's kind of when I dove head first into nutrition, holistic health, alternative wellness, and also into the psychology of human behavior and communication, specifically around intimate relationships. Because I realized that my intimate relationships weren't working and my health wasn't in alignment. And so that brought me down a path of international travel. It brought me into 10 days of silent meditation retreats. It brought me into detox centers. And it also brought me into the world of Tantra. It just kind of stumbled upon my life. And for those of you who are listening who don't know what Tantra is, it's an ancient intimacy practice specifically comes from India. And it's been used for thousands of years, but in a very, very basic foundational structure of it. It's being present in your body and present with your lover's body when you're in lovemaking or in intimacy connection. So that could involve eye gazing, and that even just eye gazing in its own is very uncomfortable for some people when they're having sex. It can also be not even having sex or being penetrated, but it can be like sitting cross-legged and eye gazing and doing breath work together, breathing intentionally together. So that kind of got me into this journey. And, I found out, just so I don't leave you cliffhanging, I actually found out I had heavy metal poisoning, which is not very talked about even today, but back then it wasn't even talked about at all. So I had heavy metals, which is mercury and lead. So for a lot of people, if you're struggling with health issues and you can't get the solution with the doctors, I usually say get tested for mold poisoning or get tested for heavy metal poisoning. Those two are kind of the primary ones, especially if you're having candida issues and you can't figure out what they are, because they can make your sexuality and your intimacy very uncomfortable and very awkward.
So how did where was the metal coming from? Was it just in food, in the air? I've never heard of this before. Pull that apart for me.
Actually, interestingly enough, 5 years ago, Tony Robbins almost died from heavy metal poisoning. So thank God. Thank God he didn't die, and thank God for that because he's bringing more awareness to it. Mm-hmm. He got it from fish. You can get mercury from fish, so I highly recommend staying away from larger fish like tuna. It's very, very heavy, laden with mercury. I don't have a specific proof to show where it's from. My mom wanted me to get tested because she found out she grew up in a cancer zone in Long Island, and then she got breast cancer. And then if you have mercury or let it in your body, you can actually transfer it to your child if you have. So that was her theory. I don't really want to get too into this because it's kind of controversial, but I didn't get back. I didn't get vaccinated as a child at all in any way, shape, or form. And when I was 18, I did get vaccinated, but I did have the health issues happen before I got vaccinated, so I don't think it's necessarily that. But I do have to say that at 18, when I got fully vaccinated, I got exponentially sicker right away. So I don't know if that activated it or added to it. I really don't have an answer. I just know that I went through years of, irritable bowel syndrome, foggy brain. I was like about 35 pounds less than I am now, which I'm a really healthy weight right now. So I couldn't eat anything, couldn't digest anything, had horrible candida problems. I was sick. I don't know. We have lead in our walls, which I had if we live in an older house. And mercury is, in fish. But I don't have an answer, really. I'm not a doctor.
No, that's just the first time that I've ever heard about that. I wrote that down immediately. I was like, oh, this is a new rabbit hole for me. Especially when it's connected to, vulva health. You're always looking for any answer, explanation of why it could potentially be affecting something on your body. So I like the awareness that you brought to it, because I literally have never heard about that until right now.
Yeah, I didn't either. And no, not a lot of people talk about it. So I'm not an expert in it by any say. I just had that experience, and it brought, this really intense vulnerability. And I also brought a lot of doctors looking at my vulva and prodding and poking at my vagina. So I think in a way, even though it was very uncomfortable for me at the beginning, it kind of got me more comfortable with my own body. Strangely. So yeah, that's kind of where my trauma comes from. I think a lot of women, and it gave me a gift though. I think it gave me a gift as in I was laser fierce about what I was available for and what I wasn't. And I think because of that, I was able to put up energetic boundaries and verbal boundaries. And I've never had any molestation or rape or anybody do anything to my body that I didn't feel comfortable with. And I've traveled the world by myself, and I've been very independent and moved to different countries multiple times alone. And I just have always been super fierce with get your hands off me and get the fuck away from me. And it's pretty amazing how powerful that is. And authentically, it's not a very common thing that women do. And when I've done it and I've been approached by a man in a way that I didn't feel physically comfortable, and I verbalize vocally what I'm feeling, they get surprised. And they usually, 99.99% of the time, they listen to me the first time. So that's kind of one of the things I teach is boundaries.
There's a weird programming in the masculine collective that everybody got taught of, hey, this is the way that you come on to a woman. And then, even catcalling in movies and complimenting and all of this, low vibrational coming on to people. And women are trained to be submissive, right? They were never really trained to stand up for themselves. And if they were, there's kind of a peer pressure aspect to it that I found growing up. So I love that you were able to put those boundaries out immediately. And the response was, oh, yeah, no, I get it. I'm a back off. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's also how you say it, too. I think that any relationship with any human being, it's not exactly what you're saying, but it's the tone and the way of being in which you say it. So like if you're being very meek and submissive, but saying, oh, no, or if you're standing in your power and being very clear and direct and to the point, they're going to hear it. But or if you're going into a bitchy, energetic way of being, that's going to create a different reaction, right? So it's really standing clear and truthful and grounded. And like, it hasn't happened in a really long time for me because I've practiced this for so long, and I really love teaching my clients boundaries and consent and how to communicate clearly. But if you're listening to me right now and you're like, wait, how do I do that? Or I have men treat me disrespectfully all the time. It's really at first an inside job and getting really crystal clear on what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. And then using your voice clearly right away, the second you feel the uncomfort in your body. So it's really bringing awareness to the body. And I use a lot of somatic work as well, is like feeling the feeling. So for me, like if I'm uncomfortable with a man and the way he's communicating to me, I'll feel a tightness in my gut. And I'll feel like this kind of like desire to shrink down and almost disassociate and disconnect from myself because I'm feeling maybe fear or anxiety or stress. And so it's really taking a deep breath, being aware of how I feel, and then going, okay, what do I need right now? What is it that I need? I need him to take 3 steps backwards. So then you look at him, and this is vulnerable and it's very powerful, but you just look at him clearly in the eyes and say, the way that you're talking to me and how close you are to me right now is making me very uncomfortable, and I need you to take 2 steps backwards. And if you're not available to do that, then I'm going to walk away.
That is really powerful, especially if you do say it in a, I don't want to be like in a nice way, right? Because we've all been trained to be a good girl, but standing in your power. Oh, I mean, there's so many different scenarios. I used to manage restaurants, and I managed a bar one time. So, I mean, it's just a cesspool of men standing too close to you, saying things that you don't want to hear. And I know that I definitely had more of an aggressive tone. But I also, like, I don't take shit. Like, if I don't want you in my bubble, you have like 2 to 3 seconds to get out, or I'm probably going to turn into a lion. Like I was very fierce about that. And that definitely had to do with a lot of personal trauma that I had. I realized that when I started going through my healing journey, like there is a better way of saying it and not reacting from your trauma every time someone comes into your bubble. And like balancing that lioness in me has definitely been one of the biggest things that I've had to work on and still work on to this day.
And one of the greatest ways in which to work on that is to train your nervous system to respond differently before you're in the situation.
That's a really good idea.
So that involves doing like one of them, the one that comes to my mind because I've been doing yoga for 10 years now, is pranayama, which is a breathwork practice in which you hold one nostril with one finger, you put another finger on in between your 2 eyes, and you use it's like your pointer finger and your thumb finger, and you breathe in for 5 seconds on one nostril, hold for 5 seconds, and release for 5 seconds on the other nostril, and then you'll inhale for 5 seconds, hold for 5 seconds, and release on the opposite nostril. And that's one round, and you can do it up to 10 times. And what it does is it regulates your nervous system to be calm under stress.
We all need that.
So, yeah, that one, and also all different forms of breath work practice. My current favorite to regulate my nervous system under stress is the Wim Hof ice plunging or cold plunging.
I was just going to say, do you know Wim Hof? So that's funny that you brought that up. I love Wim Hof. I do it in the shower. I don't do the cold stuff yet, but I'll sit down and I'll do the like 15 rounds of circle breathing. And then I don't time myself in the shower, but When I was consistently doing it, I would get it up to about 3 minutes of breath holds. And like the euphoric vibrational state that I was able to access just through breath work alone was and probably still is my favorite. I'm really good with diving into so many different things at one time that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Oh, that was amazing. Okay, now let's go here. So pranayama definitely was one of the first things I was introduced to by one of my friends who's a yoga instructor. And when Wim Hof I was introduced to about 2 years ago, and that was really transformational for me at that time as well.
Yeah, no, I love his work. I love his breathwork practice. I do it on a regular basis. But the cold plunging is kind of actually going in the cold water has been really regulating my nervous system to be able to handle stress. And I feel euphoric. And I actually, interestingly enough, I've noticed that cold water plunging actually turns me on.
Interesting.
Which I was pretty surprised about that because a lot of people aren't talking about that. They're talking about the good feelings, right? But I think it's because after the cold water, which is really cold and really intense, but there's a reason we're doing it. It's because when you get out, you feel so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
And when you feel good in your body and you feel like your body's activated, right? So like the cold water activates every single cell in it. Like it it's like a light bulb. It turns it on, right? And in our daily habits, in our current modern world, we're turning ourselves off consistently with technology, with comparing ourselves on social media, with watching Netflix, with some people video game, which is mind-blowing for me that we do that. But I find games on my phone too that I like get caught up in and I have to delete and disconnect from, and I feel awareness to my vibration. So this is something I'm really passionate about teaching women, is how to work with their energetic vibration in their sexual energy, because we women have a very specific sexual vibration that we put out. We project it into the world on a consistent basis. And if majority of the time we have no idea we're doing it.
That's majority. Very true. That's very true. We have a friend that every time we take her to a concert, she's not allowed to go anywhere by herself because she'll walk away like 2 feet away from you and you'll stare and there will be men circling her like shark with bait. And we'll be like, okay, like, who's going to go get the drinks this time? And she's not allowed to go. She did one time and she came back. She's like, those guys were so nice. They bought me a beer. And I was like, why would you take a drink from a stranger? And she goes, hey, I grabbed a beer with a lid on it. I'm not stupid, okay? And I was like, dude, I'm just saying. I was like, you have a magnetism about you when not only when she walks into a room, like, you know, she's a goddess, right, when she walks in, but I've never seen someone be circled by men so much in their life and honestly just kind of like giggle about it. She's not scared. She's 100% in her power about it. And she's just like, oh, you guys are so sweet. Thank you. Have a good day. You know, and then we're like, get over here. Like we're always like watching her, and like me and my other friend were like glaring at all the guys because like we know what you're doing. Like you don't get to come on to her. But it's funny that you say that because you're right. Like there is a very, very powerful vibration and definitely a magnetism that a lot of women have no idea that they're putting out. And I think building an awareness collectively would be better, so you know how to like harness that energy and protect it more.
Well, it's learning to turn it on and turn it off in the most appropriate ways, and when it's appropriate to put it out there and when it's appropriate not to. And I think part of the reason I've become acutely aware of it is because of Tantra and that, but when I was younger and I wasn't aware that I had it, I had this similar experience as your friend. Where I would get whatever I needed or wanted whenever I walked into a bar or a club. Like I would just get to the front of the line and get in effortlessly. And the bartenders would give me free drinks all night. And the club owners would connect me with whoever. And I would be with a group of girlfriends who were just as hot, if not hotter than me physically. You know, like it wasn't about the way I physically looked. It was a just certain energetic frequency that I was putting out. And I started to become aware of it. I mean, like, this is interesting. I'm being treated differently than my friends. Why is that? And that's a really good way to start, right? Where if anything in your life, you see kind of an awareness of a pattern, right? Whether it be a good pattern or a bad pattern, a positive pattern or a negative pattern. It's questioning, why is that? And this is something that I have done really, really solidly with my relationships, because I was having a pattern of giving my heart away to men, falling deeply in love, and then having them leave me for somebody else. And I couldn't understand it. I was like, okay, I'm a great catch. I'm like, I don't understand what is going on here. Like, I love sex. I'm a great cook. I'm a great communicator. We're not fighting. Like, why are they going towards somebody else? And it took a lot of years of personal growth and a lot of questioning, right? But it got down to, I finally figured it out, is any pattern I believe that we have in our lives, any pattern, whether it's just empowering or empowering, comes down to our core childhood wounds. And this is based on psychology, not necessarily wounds, but our core, like 0 to 8, right? This is based on psychology. We know that the core foundation of who we are is established from the years 0, from when we were born to 8 years old. And in that period of time, I realized that my father when I was 6, got a woman pregnant. My parents went together, but he got his girlfriend pregnant and had another daughter. And when I was 6 years old, I made up a story subconsciously in my head that the men that I love leave me and choose a different woman.
Interesting.
And they take their love away and they give it to another person, another woman. And it was really putting my big girl panties on, looking at the mirror and going, Jenny, you are the common denominator in this thing. I could have been bitter and angry and sat in my room and said men are evil and men are horrible creatures and they leave you and they break your heart. But if I thought back to it, the majority of the men left me in pretty respectful ways. Like, they weren't being disrespectful to me. I just wasn't able to manipulate or control them with my sexuality or my whatever, my being a good girl or a nice girl or whatever. So I had to look back to where that wound was. And when I tapped into that wound, I cried for 3 solid hours. I just let all the emotions out. And I think that created that created healing in my nervous system. And then since then, I've not had that problem.
That's a really profound way of doing subconscious healing. I'm really into a lot of subconscious meditation, especially at night when I can fall asleep with my headphones in and do that, because I realized a lot of the things that I had been working on, I had cleared a lot of the conscious stuff away through, shadow work, regulating nutrition, whatever I could do. But there was still some subconscious stuff in there that was really, really messing with me. And I still go through to this day. The healing journey never ends, right?
Never.
But the crying for 3 hours straight, I have had multiple days like that with different issues and subconscious programming that I had to let go of. And crying is still something that I know is good for you. It helps. I understand the science behind it, but I'm still oh God, I have to cry again. Okay. Whatever it takes to get on the other side of the mountain, I guess.
I mean, crying's uncomfortable, and it makes your face puffy and your eyes swollen, and you have to blow your nose, and like, I get it.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to talk a little bit about sex and pleasure, because there is that story, right? Where like, so something I'm really passionate about, and I share, and when this podcast comes out, it'll be complete because I'm completing it this weekend, but I have a mini course on a sacred self-pleasure ritual. And I think if you're listening and you're in a relationship, this is great for you. If you're listening and you're single, this is great for you. If you're listening and you have no sex drive and you don't want to be touched, and you have no desire to be intimate with anyone ever again, this is great. And if you have a great sex life, you're having sex all the time, it's also good for you. So it's as long as you have, I mean, technically men could do it too, but the one that I put out is primarily for women. And I was actually hanging out with a girlfriend yesterday who's also a sex coach, and we were talking about the concept of when we stop having sex, we lose our sexual drive. And I've noticed that in my own body, that if I'm not consistently having sex, I don't necessarily want to have sex. And if I am consistently having sex, I want sex more. I don't know if you've felt that way in your body or not, but and so we were talking about how pleasure is a practice, which is totally in alignment with the self-pleasure ritual mini course, is that being very intentional, being very intentional with your pleasure in your own body for yourself. Not as a performance tool for a man, not as a obligation because you're supposed to be a good girl and have sex with your boyfriend or your husband, but for your creative energy and your creative turn on to be activated within your body. And what that gives you is confidence. It gives you release of anxiety. It gives you a deep inner peace. It can activate potent creativity in your body if there's something that you wanted to do for a long time, but you feel stuck, from anything from writing a book to trying something new, or even confidence to ask for a raise, or to go out and date again, or to have mind-blowingly epic sex with your partner, starts with you and your own body and your own nervous system. And I believe that when you start practicing pleasure on your own, and you practice receiving pleasure in your body, then you know what you like, you know what you don't like, and then you can communicate your desires with your lover. And this is something that can be uncomfortable. It can. But also, having sex with somebody and not getting pleasured is also uncomfortable. You got to choose your uncomfortability, right? Or having meaningless sex. You know, I'm seeing a lot of women in the dating world right now, and they're desperate for connection. And I've been there too, desperate for connection. So one of the ways that is the easiest ways in which to get connection, physical connection, is having sex with someone. But then what happens is it's unconscious sex. It's not intentional sex. They're not communicating clear boundaries or wants or turn-ons. And so then after the experience, the guy will leave and their nervous systems crash. And then then it becomes like this anxious attachment energy where, like, because our bodies as women get attached to our lovers. Because think about it. If you're having sex with a man and you're a woman and he is literally plugging into you. He's into your nervous system, into your body, into your auric field, into your vibration. And that stays with you for a few days, if not a few weeks after the experience. and you receive his energy too. So if he's like in a really, really bad mood or had a really bad week, or he's depressed or really anxious or feeling really off, you're going to receive that energy from him. You might be feeling off and you don't even know why, or depressed after an experience, you don't know why. And so the way in which to do that is getting aware of your own sexual energy through and your desires and your turns ons and your turn offs, and getting really clear within your own body, because it's a lot safer to start there. And to do that, and then being able to communicate it, and it's regulating your nervous system to receive pleasure and know what pleasure is in your body. So a sacred self-pleasure ritual is, imagine like the most romantic experience you can possibly imagine with a lover, where they have roses and candles and music, and they're, caressing your skin and your body, and they're seducing you. Maybe you've had this experience in the past, or you have watched, more of a romantic pornographic experience, or even like some TV movies. There's some love scenes that are absolutely stunning and beautiful and that excite you and turn you on and turn on your nervous system. It's that, but you're not trying to get it from somebody outside of you. You're getting it from yourself, and you're regulating your nervous system to receive that type of care. So if you're consistently getting men who are using you, this is a little harsh, but like as a blow-up doll, and they're not caring about your pleasure, and they're disconnected and disassociated, and maybe don't call you the next day, or aren't caring about your pleasure, it's time to start caring about your own pleasure. It's time to start putting your pleasure as a priority. And one thing that with my clients, the one thing I hear, number one excuse is, oh, I don't got time for that.
Do you think it has to do a lot with the way, again, that like men masturbating is just like super normal? Like, they can just do it whenever they want. They can talk about it. It's just accepted, it's just a part of them, right? Like, oh, where's your sock at? When you're like coming into boys' sexuality, and then when girls come into their sexuality, it's like, no, shame, over and over and over. Like, women don't do that. So when you think not only about the conscious societal programming, you think about the so many deep levels and walls of subconscious programming, where at the first time that I thought about that, I remember being shamed when I was younger for it, and it made me feel dirty, like there was something wrong with me because I wanted to explore my own body. I got into a first love relationship super young, and I wanted that fairy tale, like high school sweetheart, be in love the whole time. So, you do what you think you're supposed to do. You be the good girl, you do what they say, you cook their dinner, do their laundry, basically like take over for their mother, right? And I couldn't tell you how many times where, like, the example that I can think of, because this was way before even self-pleasuring, was like we broke up for like probably a couple months, right? So then we're both already sexually active, so we're gonna go be sexually active with somebody else. We come back together, and now we have new moves, and we use those new moves on each other, and I'm not allowed to call him out that he did something completely different on me that he didn't in the last relationship. But I was shamed for not only wanting something else, but I was shamed for going and having sex with somebody else when we were clearly broken up, and I was literally trying to move on from a very toxic relationship anyways. But when it did come to, hey, do you want to touch yourself? It was all about performing for him, and it really had nothing to do with me. And I mean, even like pornography was probably the biggest thing where he got those ideas, and then just the fact that, like, hey man, if you got to touch yourself, it's totally cool. Like, all men do it. boys will be boys, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, no, 100%. You touched on all of it. Like, especially if you were raised in a religious background, a lot of times it's shameful, it's dirty, it's wrong, it's bad. It is in our culture, it's considered shameful or wrong for a woman to be turned on. If you look at history in general, like every time, like even in America in the 1940s and 50s, the word hysteria comes from a woman who is sexually turned on. And a woman could be put into a mental hospital by her husband.
Because women were property back then.
Exactly. In which they used shock therapy if the woman wanted to have sex too much.
So I don't know if this is actually true because I didn't do my research on it. I just read it and was like, that actually makes sense. But around the time that hysteria thing happened, they said there was mass hysteria around women where basically they went to the doctor and this doctor basically invented the vibrator, right? And you would go to the doctor, he would stimulate your clitoris, you would orgasm in the doctor's office, and then you would be better, right? And I have no idea, like, I don't know the year or anything. I just remember seeing it on like some history page that I follow, and I was just like, this is so sick. Like, this is so sick that that's what they did. I mean, when you think of like negative collective energy, like clearing it, the poor feminine, the suppression of the feminine through all walks of life, it just still blows my mind.
That's why it's empowering right now. Like, you have the opportunity right now in this moment to make history change. And it is a reclamation to embody your pleasure. Sorry, I'm having...
Yeah, okay. While you take a drink, I would just say, I know that my creative energy and my sexual energy and my healing energy and my nurturing energy are all very, very tied to like the lower three chakras is what my favorite research to go through. And I suppressed a lot of my creativity for like over a decade, and definitely had a lot of sexual trauma that I didn't really think that was sexual trauma because I wasn't educated properly on sexual intimidation, sexual harassment, that you can take consent back, that you can stop, like so many different like definitions that I feel like we were kind of taught wrong, or we didn't understand the depth of it. We kind of got like the Jesus speech about it, right? Like, be a good girl, be a virgin, your body's your temple, don't give yourself away, don't be a loose woman. I remember hearing that way too often where I was from. Nobody will respect you if you have a certain amount of sex partners. And then I remember even like I had a bunch of guy friends growing up, so we would all sit around and I was one of the guys, so they would just talk about, you know, all the girls that they were touching around the tri-state area. And they would tell you who smelled, who's a freak, who likes anal, who sucks good dick, who doesn't, like just very supremely degrading sentences, which at the time were just all trained to be like I was super curious, right? Because I'm like, well, like I wonder what someone would say about me if they got with me, especially when you're like a teenager almost, like going through all your hormonal changes. Candida is going to be a thing. Again, women really aren't educated enough on their vulva and their vagina enough. So like if a guy's like, oh, she smelled like fish, I'm just like, okay, well, did you ask her what her diet was and what her stress level is? Because like there's so much more that goes into it than, oh my God, she's nasty. And that would be a lot of the portrayals from these very, I just like to say, low vibrational men. And I'm not blaming them by any means, but the programming in both of the collectives is extremely toxic, which is why I think work like yours is very, very important. One of the biggest things that I realized that I struggled with for the longest time was receiving and not really knowing how to do it. And disassociation was a very, very big part of my younger sexual experiences. And probably just within like the last year, I've been able, like I still say I'm still working on like root chakra healing the most, just to build that foundation. And that's where you have to go through a lot of sexual understanding, regardless if you've had trauma or not. Like, and that was a really big one for me, because like those are like the 3-hour cry sessions for me, where I was like super connected to my body, because I've been doing yoga since 2013, so I pride myself on talking to my body and having it talk back to me. And you know, I kind of had that out of body experience for a minute where we're just talking to each other and I'm like, I can't believe I did that to you. You know, that's just, it's crazy to have that realization. And I definitely don't like blame myself. I forgive myself for not really knowing any better, or just kind of going along with the status quo of like being the good girl and, you know, wanting to be loved so bad that I settled for a lot of things that I didn't want to settle for. Like looking back, I'm like, oh gosh, what a life lesson, I guess. But receiving was one of the biggest things, and still something that I have to work on to this day, because it's so easy to just go back to that neuroplasticity of disassociation in my brain.
Yeah. And that's where sacred self-pleasure rituals can come in, right? It regulates your nervous system to receive pleasure within yourself. And it's also a tool to help you like do personal development work in the form of somatics. So somatics is feeling the embodiment experience in your body. So it's like if you're having stress, you're aware that, oh, stress equals tight ball fire in my gut. Or when you're feeling love, you realize that love is a blast of energy that's light and bright, vibrating out of your heart and down your arms into your fingertips and out into the world, right? That's just being aware of sensations in your body and allowing them to be. And sexuality is one of the most powerful ways to move energy and to heal stuck energy. And when you're talking about the root chakra and the sacral chakra and the solar plexus, right? Those are the base 3 foundational chakras that the majority of the world hangs out in. You know, the root chakra is all about survival, basic human needs like shelter, food, security, safety. Then the sacral chakra is all about sensuality, creativity, flow, sexuality, reproduction. Then the solar plexus is where your ego is, but it's also where your intuition lies. So like if you have an intuitive hit, you follow your gut, right? We say that. So those are the 3 chakras in which the majority of us hang out in, and it's also the majority of where sexual energy tends to lie. And I learned from a sexual Tantra teacher that unfortunately she has passed away. Her name was Palm Isadora. She was a very transformational, above her time Tantra teacher in Los Angeles, and was getting very, very, very famous she was at the height of her career when she unfortunately passed away. But she taught me in workshops that I worked with her is how important it is in sexual energy to bring the energy out of those 3 chakras up into your heart and through your throat and all the way up into your crown chakra. And that when we do that, that's when we can like not become slaves of our sexuality or sexual energy. And it's very important for both sexes. I think it's specifically important for women to be able to release energy for their creativity in a higher way, but we also can have much, much more mind-blowing orgasms and become very multi-orgasmic in that way and experience pleasure on a whole new level. It also clears blocked energy, which again, you know, you can cry and have trauma be released from the body. And I also think it's good for men too, because I think like I call it like jack off energy or like jack off culture. If I can feel, and I'm sure you can feel if I'm talking about it, if you haven't noticed it before, you can tell energetically if a man jacks off too much, even without knowing, based on his energy.
His life force energy just looks drained to me is what I would think.
Yeah, and there's this kind of like I know it sounds weird, but like this kind of greasy feeling about him. Like this greasy, but leechy, like disrespect or crassness that comes from him. That I've noticed, or this like desperateness. There's a desperation. And we have it as well. Like I played with my own energy. Like so one of the phases that I went through, and I've seen other women go through, is that like when you do, like if we're restricted so much in our sexuality, right, and it's so shamed and it's so bad, and then we step into that empowered sexual self, right? We're like, oh my God, I'm empowered. I can have sex. I can be a sacred. I can be a sacred slut. I can have sex with who I want. Fuck this. Like whatever. Like I'm gonna do what I want to do. But then that can also turn kind of into the jack off energy for women, where it's like they're constantly needing more and more and more and more and craving more, and it can happen for women too, especially even if you're not having sex with multiple people, but you're having a vibrator orgasm like really quick before you go to sleep. It's similar. And what happens, what Psalm taught me is that the energy is kind of like a figure eight. So it goes between the root chakra and the sacral chakra like a figure eight, and then it drops out of the body from the root chakra. And when that happens, it can drop the energy of the body and deplete you. So then you need it and you crave it and you want more of it. And it's just like this kind of addiction that happens. And if we're going to go the complete extreme of that energy, I believe that's the energy of molestation or rape or even like it can go really, really toxic, but there is some toxicity in sexuality sometimes, to like child issues and molestation. And so many women and boys have been molested at this young age, right? It's a hugely, hugely common thing, which absolutely, completely breaks my heart. So
yeah,
much.
And it especially happens at an age where they didn't even realize it happened. Like
they didn't even realize what it was.
Yeah, 0 to 8 years old, right? You're not really going to remember those. The subconscious has it, and then it's stored in your body. And then, you know, again, having the guy friends, there's a supreme amount of pressure to lose your virginity as a guy. And there's a supreme amount of pressure to grow breasts and eventually learn a blowjob by a certain age for a girl. Like, you don't want to be a prude and you don't want to be a slut. So, like, what do you do?
And you don't want to be a tease. You don't want to be a tease
Yeah,
either.
you don't want to be a cock tease, right? I forgot about that one. Heard that a few times in my life when someone came on to me in the wrong aspect. They're like, oh, you're a cock tease. I'm like, we've been just talking randomly for 10 minutes. I don't know who you're sleeping with, but this is not the way it works for me.
Yeah, so when you're embodied in your sexual pleasure, right? When we own our sexual energy, we have control of it. We know how to use it and play with it and manipulate it and throw it out and pull it in, which we can do. It is possible for us. For us women, we can do that. It takes practice, it takes awareness, it takes intentionality, it takes being in ownership of our nose and our consent. When we're in that, then we get to help using our voices. And I think that's when we bring the sexual energy through our body and up into our throat chakra, then we can, you know, like I've been shamed, or I don't know if it's necessarily shame, but teased or made comments from, because I'm very vocal in my sexuality. When I'm having sex, I don't have any issues with being too loud. Which I've had moments where I'm like, oh God, am I too loud? I'm going to make somebody uncomfortable. And then I think about myself, is that another level of shame of women's pleasure? Mm-hmm. But what I realize is that opens up that space to speak, right? To speak your truth. And so I think that the more embodied sexual women we become, embodied in our sexual women, and we're unapologetic with who we are as creatures, then we can communicate clearly with men when they say things that are inappropriate, because they need to be put in their place, and they don't even know. Like, I say things Go back to like the Black Lives Matter concept. Like there were areas in which we just were not aware of. I was not aware of that I was doing that was racist, and that brought awareness to our faces, right? So we get as women to bring awareness to men when they're saying something that's inappropriate.
Do you find it triggers a lot of them?
It did in the beginning because of how I said it. So it's a practice. If they're getting triggered, that is feedback that you're not communicating it with power or grace, or it's really coming down to respect. If you're shaming them and judging them and making them these evil creatures and wrong and bad and misbehaving, then it's not going to help. There's no point in doing it. You got to do it from a place of service, a place of love, a place of compassion, a place of honor, saying, hey, when you said that, that made me feel like, when you called me a tease, like, why would you say that? Like, where did that come from? Because that made me feel uncomfortable and not like I don't want to talk to you right now. Like, I don't want to be around you. And that's not my deepest desire. Like, my deepest desire is for us to have a communication that's great. That will be uncomfortable for him, but he's not going to be able to respond like, oh, what the fuck, right? Most of the time when that happens, they'll be, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't even think about that. Like, totally out of line. And if they're communicating with apology and they're meeting you, that means you're communicating effectively.
Very, very well put advice.
Because like, I think also as women, and I actually was watching Love is Blind recently, I realized we shame men a lot. We put them down. We make them wrong or misbehaving. And that is a horrible toxic trait that the women do. A horrible toxic trait, because men just want to make us happy. Really at the core foundational level of who they are, they want to serve us, protect us, and make us happy. Really. And it's our job to create that invitation for them to stand up and be in their power. And that took a lot of training for myself. I recommend to every single woman in the world to read the book, The Queen's Code by Alison Armstrong. I've read that book 17 times.
Wow.
I've never read a book more. And she specializes in the communication between men and women. We speak different languages completely. We're speaking absolutely completely different languages. And with her work is, I get feedback. If a man isn't treating me the way that I want to be treated, that is because I am not communicating in a way that he can understand my language. Right? So I'll give you a super simple example. I hate taking out the garbage. I hate it. I don't want to touch it. I don't have anything to do with it. And so I communicated clearly with my partner. We lived together. Hey, I don't want to take out the garbage. Would you be able to do that? And he said yes. And I caught myself at the beginning getting irritated and annoyed and pissed off when he didn't take out the garbage when it was full. And I would get bitchy and annoyed. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, why don't you take out the garbage? Like, what the heck? Like, what's wrong? And then I realized that he would get defensive, and then it would just create this fight. So then I just learned a simple trick. Going to him and be going, hey, babe, the garbage is full. Could you take it out in the next couple hours? And he's like, great, totally done. Garbage is taken out, no drama. Right? I didn't make him shame. I didn't make him wrong. I mean, that's a super, super, super basic foundational.
Yeah, but it definitely sounded much better.
Yeah, and we do this all the time as women. We nag at men, and we want to fix them and change them and make them better. And in Alison Armstrong's book, she says that we women are comparing ourselves and the rest of the world, especially men, to the perfect woman. And we have this perfect woman in our heads that is a made-up reality, right? And this is why we like get Botox and boob jobs and designer bags and expensive clothes and everything, because we want to be the perfect woman. And then we compare everyone else around us, but your perfect woman is different than my perfect woman. And then we compare men to the perfect woman too, but we really just see them as misbehaving, hairy women.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. That's a nice introspective way to look at it.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we get clear with our boundaries, we get clear with our yeses or nos, and we also honor and respect and adore and love men and cherish them. They're so incredible. They really are.
There's so many things, sorry to cut you off, there's so many things that masculines do that I'm extremely grateful for, just because I don't want to do it, like you with the garbage. But secondly, like, I'll run into things where my husband's muscles are needed because I do not have the muscle tone to do this certain project. When we buy a new piece of furniture that happens to come in 3,700 pieces, and it looks like one of those god-awful puzzles to put together. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, let's buy this, this looks great. We get home, we open the box, all the parts go out everywhere. There's just shit everywhere. And my mind literally like clams up and I just start freezing. And he already knows it's not on my resume to put stuff together like that. I just do not enjoy it. He does enjoy that. So I found a lot of my weaknesses, he comes in with his strengths and really helps me with that. And I've always believed that the woman, besides just being amazing mothers, amazing nurturers, housekeepers, all of that, the spiritual aspect that they provide to the man, which clearly is an invisible energy in today's physical world, but that is one of the main things overlooked in the feminine collective. And there's, again, like, it's just about education. Men aren't taught about, giving a woman something and them going and multiplying it for them. Like, you put a seed in her, you could potentially have one or multiple children, however that goes. But there's so many things masculine collective wise that I really had to sit down and make a gratitude list one time, because due to my trauma, I was so blocked off from not even giving a shit what they do right, because I'm so sick of all the other negative things that are going on, and I want these to change so bad. But where you focus, that's where the energy goes. So I always enjoy just being like, oh, I'm so glad that he does that. It just makes my life so much easier when we are able to balance each other out the correct way.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's true. A lot of times we remember those things after we break up with somebody, or, in the moments we're like, oh gosh, I don't want to regret that. So it's really good to have a gratitude practice for your partner. And I tell my partner every day, thank you for this and thank you for that. And thank you for driving right now. I'm so grateful you're driving. I don't want to be driving.
I do that often too.
And thank you for being so kind to my friends and so present with them. And just the little things that I really do appreciate, and being aware of those, is really helpful and healing too. I think the men are suffering too. Where, it's not just us women. Men are confused and lost and don't know where their role is as women are rising up. They don't really know where, their old role isn't being fulfilled the same way. And so we get to invite them to rise up and to grow and to expand. And that's, men aren't taught this. They should be taught by their fathers, but they're not most of the time. And so it is our role to invite them into their own growth. It's not our role to teach them.
That was a big one for me too. I'm like, look at this, look at this, look at this. And he's just like,
Yeah.
I'm like, what? This is really good information. One of my favorite stories, so I've been practicing affirmations probably my whole life, but consciously about 4 years. I have Post-its, stuff everywhere. I'll be brushing my teeth. I have stuff on my mirror. And they're around. He sees them. He uses them randomly. And one day he came home and he loves golfing, so he watches videos all the time. And he said, this certain golfer like uses like 3 affirmations, or it's like say 3 positive things to counteract like a negative thing. Our training from a company we work with was 21 times to form a habit type stuff. And I remember him just being like so excited because like you can't really judge where the information comes from. Like there's just however it found me and activated that practice in me was for me. And then it literally took a golfer to get my husband to understand the power of affirmations and, how many people actually use these, and they're not necessarily the poster child for every day I wake up, I do a gratitude practice and I journal and I do this. And there's a lot of things that he's observed about my own self-growth in probably the last 4 years. And he'll come around to it in his own way. And like sometimes my jaw just drops because like I have the moment where I'm like, I've been saying this. And then I'm like, oh, well, like it really does, it does have to come to you in your own way. And there's a lot of holding space when you're both on your own, like growing journeys. Like sometimes you go up like 5 levels and the other person's still on like the ground floor, and they're fine being at the ground floor because it's their life path, it's their evolution too. The biggest misconception that I think that we're taught in marriage is like your souls are like merged and now you're like one person, and there's this big obedience and, he's your husband and you're your wife and you have to do this because you're married, and I'm your husband, I'm your wife, you have to do this because of this label I put on you. And I've been fortunate enough to marry a partner that is super freaking cool and didn't like any of the traditional stuff that he saw in a lot of relationships too. He's leaving right now. Bye. And we would kind of like sit and talk like besties on the porch about it, where we weren't like talking shit about anybody, but we've observed a lot of the relationships in his life and my life being together the last several years. And I'm just like, I don't really know how to be nice about it because I definitely have more of like a comedic approach when I talk about stuff, but I'm like, I don't want that. I was like, these people that we're around, they have a ridiculous marriage facade that like it stinks when I'm by them. Like I don't buy your bullshit. I don't care that you got a brand new car every 6 months because you're supremely unfulfilled in your home life. Like I see the materialism and the separation of your hearts reeking off of you when we go to whatever events we go to, and like we'll come back and I'll be like, I don't ever want to be like that. Like I know it's not always going to be the highest of highs and we're going to have lows together. I'm like, but I don't ever want to be in a false marriage where my label as a wife and my label as a marriage is weaponized against me, and I'm obligated or forced to submit to a role that I don't want to do. That's probably been like the last 2 years that we've really come to that, because there's a lot of pressure and conformity, especially when you're around other certain married people. And my husband and I are like besties. We're not like all over each other. We're not doing all of that. Oh my God, like we're married. I don't do a bunch of cute little Facebook posts anymore because I don't want to put my marriage out there in the open. Like everybody needs an update that he bought me balloons or flowers, or, oh my God, our relationship is so strong right now and we just went through this fight. And, like if we had a separation period and then like I need to tell Facebook that we became a strong couple afterwards because we fought through this big battle, like I've never been one of those people, but I've observed it a lot, and my heart kind of goes out to those people in a way because it stems from a severe insecurity in their own evolution. So I mean, yeah, leading with compassion, definitely, but there is like an annoyance when you see it, and it's also like a mirror for me because I'm like, never do I want to do that. So if I don't want to put up an anniversary post, if I don't want to do a Facebook post for his birthday or for my birthday, like we don't live our lives on social media where we need validated by 200 plus comments and 500 likes on what our life is like. And I've had people be like, you never post about your relationship. And I'm like, I have a healthy relationship. I was like, I like posting about chakras and evolution and self-development and planting seeds in humanity and just how to help the collective. Like I'm on borrowed time. I'm I don't really want to sound like a hot air balloon anymore when I talk. I've had my time. And I'm really lucky that I do have a partner that's coming into his own evolution. I skyrocketed past him, and I was very grateful that he wanted to stay, because it went from like, hey, we're going to have a normal life to, oh, this is our life now.
Yeah. It's either we grow together or we grow apart.
Yeah, definitely. And we've definitely had those moments. I think, I mean, anybody going through their own stuff, digging through all the skeletons in your closet isn't really something you think about when you get married. You're focused on the wedding, the honeymoon, family, house, like all the 3D stuff. But even like we had conversations of like self-pleasuring, and it was just like, let's not be that weird couple that has to go like hide in the closet and touch ourselves, you know, like don't make me walk in on you and be jealous that you're not touching me, because I will feel like I'll just want to kill you for keeping your penis away from me. Like, don't do that. That's my semen. I married that. It's my job to take care of it. And if you want to go hide in the bathroom, like, it's a discussion that we should have. Same for me. Like, I'm not going to be like, hey, I'm going to go pleasure myself while you're watching TV. Because, like, when he comes around me, I'm like, I'm excited that I'm still attracted to him after so long. Like, holding that attraction is really important for me. But he's been very kind with all of the stuff that's come on my journey where I'm like, hey, I'm going to take a break. So, like, take care of yourself however you need to. Good luck, bud. Good luck.
Well, I think that's great. You know, like the communication and being in alignment with what works for you in your relationship. And I think that everyone should do that, right? Not like what works for your relationship doesn't work for my relationship, or what works for my relationship may not work for your relationship. Like, and the neighbors and everybody, and we get to craft and create our own container with our partner. And I think one of the things that I find is not very healthy is when we are creating a relationship based on what our parents or our family or our culture, our community, our neighbors want versus what we want, right? So whatever is in alignment for you and works for you, I think is really important. And me and my partner, we have separate bedrooms and separate bathrooms. And that works for us. We sleep together primarily most of the time, but we have separate spaces that are our own. And that feels really good for us.
I love that, though. I had my own, not that I had my own bedroom, but before we had our daughter, I had my own, I called it my own safe space. And it was where I did my yoga. It's where I put all my records, my musical instruments, my posters. Like, it was a full-on, like, Cheyenne room. And I would just be like, okay, it was nice to see you. I'm going to go to my room now. And he's like, have fun. I'm like, okay, well, if you want to come play with me in there, like, you can come in anytime. He's like, no, I know you like your alone time. So I'm like, I do. Thank you so much for honoring that, because, you know, that's been kind of a new thing for me. But having fun in your alone time is really addicting for me now, because there's just so many things that I want to learn and do, and schooling and practices. And I mean, especially when you start, like, turn on music, light some incense or sage, and then start doing yoga. I mean, time doesn't exist to me. And I've definitely like lost that room because it's my daughter's bedroom now. But I still remember that was one of the first rooms that I had where I was able to really explore myself and really get back into who I actually was as a person. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had he not given me that room, but also supported me. Because I have had friends where they're just like, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, like, literally, if I'm not attached to their hip, if it's not all about them, like, you know, they just freak out. And I'm like, okay, well, that's like, put that monkey back on their back, right? Like, that's not your problem. They're stalking you in your own house. And it clearly shows some inner child issues that need to be dealt with. But again,
and that's that codependency energy. And I think a lot of it comes back to sexuality and that vibrational field within the lower chakras. So I do want to pull something up that you said that I want to communicate about, and it's going back to the masturbation practice or a sacred self-pleasure ritual. I personally, this is my own personal opinion, take it or leave it. Whoever's listening, take it, leave it. I think it's important for women's bodies to have a sacred self-pleasure ritual, even if they're in a partnership.
Absolutely.
I think it's and this is a ritual, like what you're talking about, like putting incense on, dimming the lights, lighting a candle, putting on sensual music, putting on lingerie for yourself, tapping into your sexual energy, dancing, looking at yourself in the mirror, really connecting with your own body, because it's bringing back into that sovereignty, right? And it's helpful for the relationship because it taps you back into your sexual energy. It turns you on. It makes you want to have sex more. But it's not cheating. It's not cheating. And that, my partner supports that within me. Like, oh, great. I'm like, hey, babe, I'm going to have a self-pleasure ritual tonight, just so you know. It's easier because we have 2 bedrooms. So I can go in and have my space, but you can do it before when they're like doing something else, right? Or if they have an event to go to, or they're going out, or even if you have 1 bedroom and you're just like, hey, I'm going to go have a sacred self-pleasure ritual and then I'll let you know when you can come in, kind of situation.
I definitely think that's powerful. And we're not to the point where he's like, how was your day? I'm like, I touched myself for 27 minutes straight today and I blew my crown chakra off of my head. I might have accidentally performed a sex magic ritual, but I promise it was all love and light. Like, we definitely aren't there, but I have thoroughly enjoyed trying to explore myself more and like taking my power back and not feeling like all of my pleasure and all of my sexual activation should go through just my husband.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it makes them also not have to be like orgasm machines.
Right?
like it makes them take like the pressure off of them. And then also in my my sacred self-pleasure mini ritual course, I teach a breathwork practice to help you activate sexuality into the other chakras so you can bring that energy up. Mm-hmm. You can do it on your own. You can do it right now. You can do it when you're driving your car. You can do it at any time. And then you can practice it in partnership, but you can also practice it during your sacred self-pleasure ritual, which then can make it easier for your nervous system to do, because when you're having sex, it's a little bit more challenging to practice it because there's another body and there's a lot going on. So then you can do that, and it's really enjoyable for the man too. Like, when a woman is in her sexual pleasure, it's a lot easier for the guy.
Yeah, he's definitely picking up on those pheromones, right? He's just like, oh, yeah. What is this?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then I want to kind of start wrapping up, but I wanted to talk about one other topic. So there's Tantra, right, which is conscious, intentional connecting through breath work, eye gazing, different energy experiences. And then there's a world of, which is kind of like, for the average person, kind of scary to listen to or hear about. It's BDSM. It's becoming a little bit more conscious or aware, a little bit more. And it stands for bondage, dominance, submission, and masochism. And, a lot of times you think about like dungeons and
the very hardcore stuff that's just like, why would anybody in the right mind want to subject themselves to that? There must be something wrong with you. You must have a lot of sexual trauma if you like any of that.
Exactly. But the truth is, I think we all have sexual trauma in one way or another. Every single human on the planet has some sort of sexual trauma, just because the way the conscious collective sees sexuality.
Absolutely.
And that being said, if we can accept that part of ourselves, right, where Tantra is the light in us, which is beautiful and healing and a really good step. If you haven't tried intentional sexuality, I highly recommend starting in Tantra. It's a lot more gentle and safe. And if you've done Tantra and you're into personal growth and into personal development and you've been on that path, sexual development through BDSM practices is so, so powerful. And in my Sacred Self-Pleasure Ritual mini course, I've incorporated elements of it throughout the program so you can see the softness of it. And there's 5 key principles in BDSM that I think that every single person on the whole planet needs to embrace and incorporate. So the first one is communication. So anytime anyone goes through any sort of BDSM practice where they're being tied up, they're being degraded, they're being spoken to they're being physically hit or having any sort of intense experience, it is all consensual and communicated to a T beforehand. So if it's done correctly. But most of the people who are in the BDSM world are educated in some way, and they've gone through an education tool. And that's what I also like is when you're getting educated around your sexuality, you're being more intentional about it, and then you're kind of clear. So it is communicated, and to a point where sometimes that is communicated so clearly, it is written down on a piece of paper, and both parties sign it. That is how much communication. And it can get so detailed to a point of, you want to be spanked? Okay, how do you want to be spanked? Do you like it to be quick and, short, or long and hard? Do you want to be spanked 3 times in a row? Do you want to be spanked with this intention? Like, do you want me to cup your bum afterwards? Like, super crystal detailed clarity. And I think that we are missing that dramatically in the vanilla practice. We are not communicating what we desire and what we don't desire before we have sex. Even in marriages.
My favorite, not to cut you off, but my favorite, that I had 2 friends that were very into the BDSM community, and I lived vicariously through them because, I just never met anybody who actually went to those links. And they said, basically when you're making your contract, you understand that the chemicals in your brain are obviously going to heighten during sex. So the things that you agreed on, you actually get to do. If you get another idea to add something outside of the contract in the practice, you both understand that since it wasn't communicated, you're not actually supposed to go there. And when they told me that, it definitely gave me a different perspective on the communication level, the openness to be able to speak your truth on what you want to figure out with your desires, what you haven't done. But I thought that was really powerful because I know that there's an overstimulation where you're just like, oh yeah, let's just do all this crazy shit, where you end up, like you said, crashing your nervous system, or you're introducing something that was out of the contract, which, again, breach of contract, right? But when they told me that, I was like, that's really profound because I've never heard anything about that before. But there was something, I can't think of what the label was, but it was new subs that were getting into BDSM, which one of my younger friends was. And she said, you have to watch for sub drop, which is a new girl that cannot communicate her desires. She cannot tell you what she wants. She just wants you to touch her, and she'll figure out if she likes it or not. That is a supreme red flag in the community, that one, you don't touch her. You sit down and talk to her about why it's important to, before we enter into this scene, so to speak, that you're able to vocalize your desires down to the very detail of how many times you would want to be spanked. And right after you get done with a scene, right, and then they're immediately like, I want to go again. And they're like, no, you have too much oxytocin and cortisol running through your body right now. Now the aftercare process comes into play, which aftercare is a beautiful thing that I honestly think that is also left out of vanilla relationships, which is why I think...
It's part of the 5.
Yeah, sorry 100%. To cut you off on that. I'll definitely
no,
stop.
It's okay.
But
no, and I want to talk about that because that doesn't just happen in BDSM experiences. That happens in the dating culture. We live in a world right now where people are going on Hinge and Tinder and all Bumble and all these dating apps, and we are hooking up quickly. We are not communicating clearly up front beforehand what's a mandatory yes, what's a mandatory no, what we need afterwards. And women are having this sub drop happen out of the BDSM community all the time. It happens. And so that's why I think learning to regulate your nervous system and getting clear on what it is that you want is so, so important. So yeah, and then so the second one is clearly communicating what you want, and then the consent of, hey, this is what I want, I'm available for this. And consent is not something that's a common thing in the world. Like, even if a guy whistles at you or grabs your butt in a bar or hits on you too close, or even is in your energetic bubble and too close to you, that's not consent. Even if a guy kisses you without asking permission, right? It's very common for you to meet somebody in the dating scene out at a bar and for you to be talking to a guy and for him to kiss you without asking permission, which I think is, we need to change that as a culture. I think asking permission, and that's one of the things I like about the play scene or the BDSM scene, is consent is never, just because you've kissed one person one time, that doesn't mean you got to kiss them again. Or just because you've had sex with some person one time in some way, like even consent of like in your relationship with your partner who you're having sex with on a regular basis, like for a man to be like, hey, can I penetrate you now? Are you ready for penetration? Even if you've had sex thousands of times, that's a level of consent, right? Sometimes we don't, as women, don't touch into our own bodies and touch with our pussies and see, is she ready right now to be penetrated? Or does she need some more foreplay or some more kissing or some more eye gazing or some more spanking or whatever? So it's really tapping into consent is something you always get to tap into. It's never expected. So that's the second one. The third one is out is always an option. Always. So there's a safe word that you use. And then, so like, think about slut shaming or peas shaming or like this expectation culture, right? Like if the guy buys you a drink or takes you out to dinner, you have to have sex with him. Or on the third date, if you haven't put out yet, then you're considered like a tease or not worth their time, or like you put all this energy out there. Out is always an option. Even if you're being penetrated and in a very intense scene, if you say your safe word, it's over. No questions asked. No shaming, no manipulation, no guilt, no like, oh, I can't believe you did that. No questions asked. You're done, right? And then that's when aftercare comes in. And I think that's so important. Even in a marriage, like you're having a bad day, you get penetrated, you're having sex, and you just are not feeling it, and your energy is so not in alignment with it, and you say, hey, babe, I want to stop. That could bring up so much, right? So much frustration from your partner, so much like that could create a fight, it could create tension, right? So out is always an option. I believe that's a huge, huge one, especially for women, but also for men, right? Like they might want to stop having sex too. They're like, maybe getting it on and they're tired and then they're like, I want to go to sleep. Like they should be out. You do not have to have, you're not signing a contract that sex looks like this every single time and this is how it's expected to be. So I think that's really, really important. And then aftercare. And I only said 4 and yet I said 5 and I can't remember it, but aftercare is connecting after the oxytocin has gone high. The energy of sex has brought the energy so high up, and then you can crash afterwards if you don't nurture yourself or be nurtured by your partner. That could be cuddling, that could be, taking a hot bath, that could be taking a shower together, that could be drinking water, having, being water brought to you. It could be, just being intentional with bringing your energy down together, because in a sexual experience, the energy goes up together. You're building that energy up together. There's an explosion, but it's really helpful to bring the energy down. So like one of the things that I actually really helped me with aftercare is I got a squirt blanket from Yoni Pleasure Palace, which is like a waterproof blanket. And so we use that to have sex on intentionally, because what we found is like after we had sex, we would like want to get out of bed really quickly and go clean up and like and then get ready and go back to sleep. And that would disconnect us from it because we didn't want to it's not very comfortable to sleep into wet spot sheets and stuff like that. Especially in your relationship, is an average thing. You don't want to fall asleep on a cold, wet, damp spot on the bed. And so having that blanket that's super cozy and comfortable, then we could just lay in that energy together afterwards and be comfortable where we didn't have to worry about messes or cleaning anything up or just being with each other and breathing together and connecting. So consent, review. It's communication, consent. Out is always an option. And I guess boundaries too is the one. It's hey, I want this, but I definitely don't want that. This is never an option. Don't ever try it. This is not on the table. But boundaries and consent can change. So it's good to check in every 3 to 6 months and be hey, we talked about this. Totally okay if it's still a no, but has that shifted? Excuse me.
Excuse you.
Yeah, so I guess that was the one I was thinking is boundaries. So the tools in which to do that is there's a want, will, won't list that if you guys go to my Instagram, you can reach out to me and I can give it to you. I don't have it on my website yet, but maybe by the time this comes out, I will. So it's a checklist of what you want, what you will do, and what you won't do. And I learned that from my sex coach teacher, Alexa, at That Sex Chick. That Sex Chick is her podcast, and then Sex and Love Co. And I got that from her. It's a want, will, won't list. What you want, what you will do, and what you won't do. And you and your partner do them. And then the things that you both want to do, you start there. And you do those together. And then if one partner wants it and the other one will do it, you can do those too. But obviously, if it's a will and a will, but you guys don't really want to do it, then you can just kind of throw it out the window. And then anything that's a definitely won't, obviously, you just don't do. But it's a way to get kind of creative with your sexuality and getting clear of do you want to try getting spanked? Is that something that's a desire for you? Or do you want to just don't like being touched on the ears, or you don't like being touched in certain parts of your body that you didn't ever communicate it? So it's an easy way to communicate it, kind of compare the lists. But yeah, I think that is kind of really important to incorporate into everyday normal sexual practices. Whatever normal means.
To tell you one of my favorite aftercare stories that one of my friends told happened to her. Because when you say aftercare, if you're not familiar with what aftercare is in vanilla or even in BDSM, you're kind of like what does that mean? Obviously cuddling and all that fun stuff. But my favorite, and this is still life goals for me, she finished up a scene on whatever their contract was, and it lasted a good hour, if not more. And she said he coached her of how depleted that she was going to be after all of this, but you're safe here, nothing's going to happen to you, I'm gonna stick with all the things. After a woman orgasms multiple times, it's almost hard for her to walk. And that is exactly what happened to her. So he drew her a bath and put the rose petals, the candles, and he picked her up and he went and he put her in the bathtub, and then he cleaned her. And he sat there on the side of the tub and took the washcloth and ran it over her head and sensually all the places that he was harder on her body 30 minutes prior. He went ahead and he was massaging her softly because her body was still completely overstimulated. The whole time he was just hey, does anything hurt? Did I hurt you too bad? Can I touch you here? Do you want me to clean you? The communication level that she had in this relationship was, goals for me at the time, and I had never experienced anything like it, but I was you're telling me a man made you come multiple times, then carried you into a bath he drew for you and cleaned cleaned up and like took care of you. And she explained like the high levels of oxytocin and the nervous system crashes. And she was like, he was able to counteract the crashing, and I was able to like regulate my body and my nervous system. Like I was drinking water. When I got done, finally my legs were able to work. I got out of the tub. He helped me get dry. I got into clothes that I was comfortable with wearing after the scene. And then he had already, like, he did like a fruit plate or like something that was just like, hey, you lost a lot of stuff. Like, here's a really good way to replenish. Like, he was, I would say, what you would call a professional dom. And I lived vicariously through her stories for a while, because I was like, I had no idea, one, that was a part of BDSM culture, but the trust level and the care and consideration for another partner, that was something that I had never experienced in my life. I think the closest thing I got to was like getting in the shower afterwards and like cleaning each other off. And I have to say that was like pretty cute. But now, like, I'm a queen. And I'm like, no, I want to be carried to the bathtub and I want to be washed. Like, treat me like I'm a Roman goddess, please, because that's exactly what I pictured. And I mean, like I said, aftercare can be just as simple as like something cuddling. I think the squirt blanket is a great idea, because you're right, like it does tend to get super messy, especially if, you know, whether he has to pull out or whether he stays in, I mean, that shit's still gonna come out. So I think that is a great reference. I didn't even know stuff like that existed. I'm used to just like throwing the sheet off or something like that, right? And the whole like, oh, let's clean up really quick. We've gotten better at that, but I can definitely say in the beginning of like most of your relationships, there is a supreme disconnect, because you're like, okay, these juices were super hot 2 seconds ago, and now we've both went into a completely different platform where it's just like, okay, go clean yourself. And I think that there's an honoring of yourself after the practice that could obviously bind you and, you know, want you to move further down the line with that person too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in my Sacred Self-Pleasure Ritual mini course, I do aftercare for yourself, so that you can teach yourself how to receive aftercare and then ask it for a partner. But one of the ones that I think that, you know, if you're listening right now, you can take away with is I say, after you have a masturbation practice, you want to take your hand and kind of cup it energetically and put it over your vulva. Not energetically, just cup your hand and put it over your vulva, and then take one hand and put it on your heart, and just breathe into the experience of what you feel like, and just visualize your energy coming down. So you're like kind of pushing on your vulva and pushing on your heart and bringing the energy together, but also bringing it down in the body, and taking deep, slow breaths, and like really connecting with different parts of you and feeling the feeling. So like a lot of times we can have an orgasm, you know, during a self-pleasure practice, where you just, you know, either get up and go on with your day and take a shower, or roll over and go to sleep, or pop on our phone and look at social media or whatever, and you're not present with what just happened. So just taking a couple of slow, deep breaths, you know, and before your practice, it's good to have like some water by your side or tea. And, you know, I like to recommend having a journal to like journal anything that came up and to communicate it, or having fruit. I do have, you know, suggest having fruit for yourself, or chocolate, or, you know, sweet snacks that are, you know, sexy and delicious, and really just being in the essence of who you are. And, you know, I recommend not getting on technology for 30 minutes after, if you have that possibility, or going for a nice walk in nature after you've calmed down and had your snacks and water and want to. But just like really being with yourself in those moments, and slowing down and being with your pleasure. Because I think a lot of times women, because our nervous systems have been regulated not to want pleasure or need pleasure or want it, that we're afraid to even be with the energy of what the pleasure has created in our bodies.
That's very, very true. I absolutely love your work, and I'm so glad that you hopped on the show because you have opened up a world of possibilities for a lot of women that probably have no idea that they even struggle with this, or, you know, there's options out there, there's help out there. So I highly recommend anybody listening going to your Instagram, connecting with you. And I really look forward to promoting your mini course when it's available and when your website's live. Right now,
So
go ahead.
When this is launched, it will all be done.
Wonderful. So right now they can connect through like Facebook and Instagram, right? Like those are the best ways to get a hold of you.
Yeah, and you know, when this podcast releases, based on your timeline, it'll be jennyheartsong.com. So as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I will be happy to link that.
Awesome. Yeah. So I have the mini course, which is going to be complete. It's the Sacred Self Pleasure Ritual mini course, and then I am planning on creating a mini course. Hopefully, it'll be done by the time this comes out, on how to use your crystal wand, which is like a crystal dildo, because it's a very different experience than regular play toys. And then I do have the program will be running when this reaches out, but I'm going to be doing a 3-month group coaching experience called the Embodied Vixen, which is really about tapping into your own body as a temple and really helping activate nourishment in the body in a way to treat your body as a temple through sacred self-pleasure rituals, understanding your menstrual cycle and how to use it to tap into your power, getting clear on how you're nourishing yourself for your sexual energy. And then it's a lot about like getting clear on what your desires are, what your sexual blueprint is, what your sexuality style is, how to communicate what you want and figure it out. And then it's also about manifesting and creating the relationship of your dreams. Primarily, it's for single women who are wanting to call in their king. That's who I like to work with. But if I have worked with women who have been married for 13 years and just are totally in love with their husbands, but they just have never been sexually met with them, and be able to give them tools to communicate and be met sexually by their partner. So that's my group program. It'll be running when this comes out, but I will be having, a future program. It's only 3 months. So probably next spring or summer, I'll be releasing another round of that. So
I love it. I can't wait to see all the continued work that you release.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
And my Instagram is Jenny Rose Heartsong. It's JENNYROSE. And then Heartsong is HEARTSONG.
Wonderful. I'll be happy to link it below. And since we have found ourselves at the end, I am going to play a clip from a show my concert wife Kate took me to in Wichita, Kansas. It's an Incubus clip, of course. So enjoy the music, my friends, and we will see you on the next episode. Jenny, thank you again.
Thank you. It was so fun.
Yes.
This is the Hoosier Media Network, your home for podcasting.